My sister stood up in the middle of dinner, smiled, and announced she was pregnant. Then she reached across the table, took my husband's hand, and said he was the father. But instead of breaking me, their betrayal lit a fuse they never saw coming. Because what they thought was the start of their new life was really the beginning of their downfall and my freedom. Like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't yet. Now let me tell you what happened next. I still remember that Thursday evening in March, as if it were tattooed on the inside of my eyelids. The air in Austin was crisp, carrying the faint scent of blooming mountain laurels, and I was walking on air myself. That morning, my boss had called me into his office and told me what I had been working toward for 4 long years. I was being promoted from project manager to commercial director. The title sounded like music. The raise 40% was almost surreal. All the nights staying late at the office, all the weekends spent fine-tuning presentations, all the patience I had swallowed when others were promoted before me. It had finally paid off. When I left work, my cheeks hurt from smiling. I called David first. My husband's voice was groggy, like he had just woken up from a nap, but he chuckled when I told him. "That's incredible, Mari," he said. "We've got to celebrate." I could hear the clinking of dishes in the background, and he sounded distracted, but I brushed it off. I wanted to share my joy. I called my younger sister next, Beatrice. She squealed a high-pitched sound that almost didn't sound like her. "Mari." "Oh my God, that's huge. We need to toast to that." I suggested Terzo, our favorite Italian restaurant downtown. Terzo wasn't the kind of place you just dropped into for dinner. It was sleek, candlelit, with walls lined with expensive bottles of wine and waiters who knew how to hover just the right amount. Meals there cost more than what some people earned in a day, but I could afford it now. And it felt right to celebrate this milestone in style with the 2 people I trusted most. I arrived early, wanting to soak in the atmosphere. I had chosen a navy blue dress, the one David always said made me look like I belonged in a boardroom and a magazine at the same time. The hem fell just below my knees, the neckline tasteful but strong, and I paired it with heels that clicked against the marble floors of Terzo as the hostess led me to a corner table. I had requested somewhere more private, away from the chatter of executives and couples. I wanted this night to be about us, about family, about the future. The restaurant buzzed softly with laughter and the clink of forks against china. A string quartet played in the background, their music weaving effortlessly through the warm golden light. For a moment, I sat back in the leather chair and let myself breathe it all in. This was my life. At 29, I owned my own apartment. I had built a career from the ground up, and I was surrounded, at least I believed, by love. My parents had raised me to believe in hard work and responsibility, in the idea that if you set your mind to something and sacrificed for it, you could achieve it. They were both public servants, my dad an accountant, my mom a teacher, and while we never had extravagance growing up in San Antonio, we never lacked anything. They taught me resilience, and I had carried that lesson all the way to this table, to this moment. When I saw David and Beatrice walk in together, I lifted my hand to wave. Something about their arrival made me pause. David's shoulders seemed tense, his eyes darting around as if the expense of the place made him uncomfortable. Beatrice, on the other hand, looked radiant, her smile brighter than I had seen it in years. She was dressed elegantly, a little too elegantly for her usual style. I dismissed the thought and rose to hug them both. "Congratulations on the promotion," Mari. Beatrice said, her hug a little too tight, a little too long. She wasn't usually the affectionate type, not with me anyway. Still, I smiled because maybe tonight was the beginning of a new chapter for all of us. We ordered a bottle of Chianti, $200 without blinking, and when the waiter poured, I launched into the story of the day. I told them about the new projects I would be leading, about the international opportunities that might be coming, about the salary increase. I couldn't stop myself, the words tumbled out in a rush of excitement, pride, relief. For once, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. But as I spoke, I noticed something. Beatrice was leaning in too much, listening with the intensity of someone watching a movie they already knew the ending to. David was fidgeting with his napkin, folding and refolding it. A tension prickled at the edges of my joy. something I couldn't quite place. Then, just as I was describing the potential for expansion into Europe, Beatrice held up a hand. Actually, she said, her voice carrying over mine, we also have news to share. I blinked at her. Oh, what's going on? She reached across the table and took David's hand. My stomach dropped, though I didn't yet know why. Her smile widened. I'm pregnant. The restaurant's hum seemed to fade into silence. My ears buzzed. My gaze locked onto their intertwined fingers. And the father, she added almost proudly, is David. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. My husband. My sister. Pregnant. And just like that, my perfect night, my celebration of everything I had worked for shattered with the force of a bomb. My lungs forgot how to work. The din of terzo thinned to a distant hiss like I was underwater watching bubbles rise and burst without sound. Across the table, my sister's fingers laced tighter through my husband's. Their faces held the same eager, brittle expression I've seen on people waiting for fireworks anticipation, mixed with a wish to be dazzled. It hit me then they expected a scene, a shattered glass, a public meltdown to prove their righteousness. Instead, my voice came out level. How long? David swallowed. He tried to steady the napkin he'd mangled. A few months. How many is a few? Beatrice wet her lips. 3. She rubbed her stomach as if the gesture might soften the math. Since December. December. My birthday month. I had taken them both to dinner at a steakhouse off South Congress, tipped heavy, laughed easy. The memory snuck up and sucker-punched me. I straightened in my chair. When did you decide to tell me in front of a maitre d', a violinist, and a $200 bottle of Chianti Mari, she said the nicknames syrupy and false? There's no perfect time for hard news. There are plenty of wrong ones. They flinched. I stared at their hands, the tan line where David's ring sat, the silver polish chipping at the edge of her thumbnail. Where? I asked. Where did it start? At my place, she said quickly, daring me to look away first. I was in Austin for a client. We grabbed tacos after you. Had to work late. Work late. The accusation in 2 words. I worked late because it's what promotion candidates do. I worked late because bills don't pay themselves and dreams don't materialize on goodwill. I worked late because I believed coming home to David meant coming home to a team, not a vacancy. A numbness settled over me, cold, clean, efficient. I picked up my glass to buy a second. Do our parents know? Her eyes flicked to David, then back. Not yet. We thought we'd present a united front. You mean shock me first? I said, and watched relief flash across David's face. The relief of a man thinking the explosion had been diffused because the timer kept ticking. He cleared his throat. It wasn't planned, he said. We didn't mean for it to happen. We fell in love. A laugh almost broke loose. I caught it with my teeth. You fell in love, I repeated, keeping my voice soft enough that only our table could hear. Between my birthday candles and tax season. He flinched again. Don't make this ugly, Mari. I blinked slowly. Flashback 7th grade, a science fair in San Antonio. I built a working model of a wind turbine from PVC and a salvaged bike hub. My ribbon was blue. Beatrice stood beside me, arms crossed over her poster board on endangered animals with pictures cut from a magazine. You always get lucky, she said then, chin high. People just like you. Later at home, Mom told me to share my prize money with my sister. It's good to be generous. I did. I always did. High school, I made honor roll without the tears. She ground her teeth over algebra and blamed the teacher. College, I got a full ride to Austin. She called it rich girl luck, even as I took shifts in the library to cover books. When I got my first real job, she asked how much I made. When I bought my first car, she asked the price. When I moved into my apartment, she asked the mortgage rate and the equity like she was studying for a test she never intended to take. Flashback ends. Back in Terzo's gold light, I set my glass down. So 3 months, after my birthday, while I was prepping for a promotion. She blinked hard but held her smile. We wanted to be honest. Now that her eyes darted to David, serious. And you chose tonight because... We wanted to share in your happiness, she said, and this time the laugh escaped me. Small, sharp. The memory reel jerked to David the night we met at a work event, how he'd looked at me like I was a safe harbor in a room full of sharks. He liked simple things, football on Sunday's brisket from a place that didn't take cards, music loud and uncomplicated. He wrinkled his nose at spreadsheets drifted when I talked about options and vesting schedules. You overthink money, he'd say, smiling hands at my waist in our kitchen. Just enjoy it. And I tried to translate my ambition into joy, to not pull him into my storm of strategy. He liked me best when I was not planning 10 steps ahead. Now he pushed words across the table like coins. We Bea and I know this is hard. But, the baby. He leaned on it like a crutch. We should all try to be decent. Decent. The word hung between us like a dare. Did decency come up when you started seeing her, or only now that you're here holding hands and ordering my wine? His jaw tensed. We didn't mean to hurt you, but you did mean to tell me here. Silence. The quartet moved into something delicate and sad. The waiter hovered with the restraint of a man who knows when a table is burning. I lifted my menu and let my eyes travel down the list I had memorized years ago. Osso buco veal, scallopine, truffle risotto. Extravagances. I allowed myself because I earned them one late night at a time. Tonight, all of it tasted like metal. How far along, I asked. 3 months, she said again, hand over her stomach staking a flag. And you plan to what? Move in together. Get married. I kept my tone neutral like I was interviewing a vendor I had no intention of hiring. We're figuring it out, she said. We thought you'd be happy for us eventually. The cruelty of that landed harder than the admission. They wanted my blessing as proof they were good people. They wanted my collapse as proof I was the problem. It was the same old script, just with better lighting. My chest felt both hollow and too full, as if someone had scooped me out and filled me with gravel. I reached into my purse, pulled out my wallet, and laid 2 50s on the linen. I stood. My chair slid back with a whisper. Enjoy the rest of your meal, I said, adjusting my dress like it was armor. You've already had mine. David's mouth opened. Mari, wait. I'm done waiting. I turned toward the exit. The room was a tunnel of gold and glass and murmurs. At the door, a mirror caught me hair-neat lipstick, unbroken eyes steady, and just behind my reflection, 2 figures at a corner table, my sister and my husband. Their heads leaned close. Their smiles were small, private, triumphant. Victorious for now. The apartment was exactly as I had left it that morning, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. David's shoes sat by the door, scuffed from weekends at the dealership. His cowboy's mug waited on the kitchen counter, the one he used every morning for coffee I usually made. In the bedroom, his shirts hung beside mine, their familiar scent clinging to the air. The life I thought we shared was still intact in fabric and porcelain and leather, but to me it was already rubble. I dropped my purse on the counter and kicked off my heels, the click of them on the tile louder than it should have been. My body was buzzing my chest tight, but my face felt frozen. I wanted to cry, to scream, to throw every last one of his things into trash bags, but I just stood in the living room like a ghost who didn't belong. The city lights spilled through the window, casting shadows across the beige sofa, where David and I used to curl up for movies on Friday nights. The same sofa where he had kissed me and told me I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. My phone buzzed. 3 messages in quick succession. From Beatrice Mari, please call me. I know it was a shock, but we can work through this like adults. From David, I'm at Bea's place tonight. We'll talk tomorrow. From Mom. Marina honey, I know you're hurt, but don't overreact. David has always been a good man, and your sister. Well, these things happen. We can't let this tear the family apart. I laughed then, a sharp, bitter sound that startled me. Overreact, I muttered into the empty room. My husband had just confessed he was leaving me for my sister who was carrying his child, and my mother's concern was about family unity. I started pacing the length of the apartment, suddenly too short. Every step carried me from the front door to the balcony and back again. My thoughts spun so fast I couldn't hold them. I felt grief raw and sharp twisting through me. I felt rage hot and immediate that made me clench my fists until my nails bit my palms. But above all, I felt exhausted. Bone-deep, soul-heavy exhaustion. Years of effort, years of generosity toward my sister, years of loyalty to David, none of it had protected me from this. At some point in the night, I collapsed onto the couch, still in my dress, my makeup smudged from the tears that finally slipped free. I don't know how long I sat there staring at the shadows on the ceiling, but around midnight the sound of keys in the lock jolted me upright. The door opened and David stepped in carrying an empty duffel bag. His face was wary, like he was bracing for an explosion. "Mari," he said softly, "I need to grab some clothes." I didn't move. "Go ahead." He lingered watching me, then set the bag on the floor. "It wasn't planned," he said as he began pulling shirts from the closet. "It just happened. Like rain," I said, my voice flat. "Like traffic." His shoulders tensed. Bea was going through a tough time. She needed someone to talk to. One thing led to another. Don't I cut him off? Don't reduce 4 months of betrayal to one thing led to another. He dropped a pair of jeans into the bag. "I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching him. "Every night I stayed late at work chasing a future for us. You were building a new life with her." He winced. "Mari, it's not like that. You were always so busy, focused." Bea. She understood me. The words hit like a slap, but I swallowed hard. She understood you. Or she was easier to impress because she never asked for more. He zipped the bag halfway, then paused. "Look, I don't want this to get ugly. We can sort things out fairly, civilly. No need for lawyers." I laughed again, low and sharp. "Fairly, after what you've done." "I contributed too," he said quickly, defensively. "Groceries, gas. I helped." My arms tightened over my chest. "Groceries and gas don't buy apartments, David." His face flushed, but he said nothing. He zipped the bag closed and slung it over his shoulder. For a moment he looked at me as if searching for the woman he had once known. The one who had laughed with him on road trips and made excuses for his lack of ambition. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone colder, sharper, and infinitely more tired. He hesitated at the door. "I'll come back this weekend for the rest." I didn't answer. When the door clicked shut behind him, the silence was heavier than before. I stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where he had been until my legs carried me into the office where I kept my files. My hands shook as I pulled open drawers and rifled through folders, though I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. Finally, I picked up my phone and dialed the only person I trusted with both my heart and my future. Helena answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep, but instantly alert when she heard mine. "Helena, it's me," I said, my throat tight. "David's leaving me. For my sister." She was silent for a beat, then, "Oh, Marina, I'm so sorry." I swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "I need this over. I need it clean. I can't." My voice cracked. "I can't let them take anything from me." Her tone shifted, crisp, professional. "Okay, first things first. We'll get your documents in order. Do you still have your marriage papers? Prenup, license, financial statements." I froze her words, cutting through the fog like a flare. Documents. Something in the back of my mind stirred an old memory I hadn't touched in years. "Do you still have them?" she pressed gently. My breath caught. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I think I do." And for the first time since that dinner at Terzo, I felt a flicker of something other than grief or rage. It wasn't hope yet, but it was close. The apartment was dark except for the glow of my desk lamp. I had pulled file folders from every drawer, papers spread across the office like a storm of my own life, bank statements, tax returns, the deed to my apartment. My fingers trembled as I sifted through them, searching for something I wasn't even sure still existed. Then, at the bottom of a green folder marked Marriage, I found a sealed envelope, the corner yellowed with time, the Travis County clerk's stamp still visible. Prenuptial agreement. The words jolted me fully awake. I sat down hard, the chair creaking beneath me. I had almost forgotten. 4 years had passed since I signed that document, 4 years of thinking it was a meaningless formality. I had been in love, reckless with trust. But I had listened to my lawyer back then, hadn't I? Patricia Williams, 50, sharp-eyed, never smiled unless it mattered. Her words echoed now, dusted off from a memory I hadn't revisited. Your young Marina, successful and acquiring assets quickly. A prenup isn't about love, it's protection. It ensures what's yours stays yours. I tore open the envelope and unfolded the pages, my heart pounding. The legal language blurred for a moment, then sharpened as I forced myself to focus. Complete separation of assets. Each spouse maintains individual ownership of all property owned prior to marriage and all property acquired during the marriage. The apartment was mine. The investments were mine. Every stock purchase, every paycheck, every late-night hour I had bled into my career, all mine. My mind raced back to that day 2 weeks before our wedding. It had been a Saturday morning in April. The sun poured into my old Honda Civic as I drove David to Patricia's office. He had been grumbling the whole ride. "Do we really have to do this?" he said, slouched in the passenger seat, sunglasses hiding his eyes. "It feels unromantic." "It's just a precaution," I told him. "You know how hard I've worked for the apartment. Patricia says it's smart." He laughed, that easy, careless laugh I once thought was charming. "Prenups are for celebrities, Mari. Rich people nonsense. You think Beyoncé made Jay-Z sign one? We're not them. We're normal." I gripped the wheel tighter. It's not about being rich. It's about fairness. You keep what's yours, I keep what's mine. If something ever happens, nothing's going to happen, he interrupted, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "We'll forever remember." But he signed. He skimmed the pages like they were a restaurant menu, not bothering to read the clauses Patricia explained carefully. She went line by line, speaking slowly as though talking to a student who hadn't done the reading. "Complete separation," she said. "No shared liability for debts. No claims to one another's property. No spousal support in the event of divorce." David nodded absently, yawning. Yeah, sure." He scrawled his signature at the bottom of each page with the bored air of a man paying a utility bill. Patricia looked at me over the top of her glasses. "He understands?" "Yes," I said too quickly. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe he loved me enough that it didn't matter. Now, years later, those signatures blazed like neon on the page. David's casual indifference, his lack of attention, had just locked him out of every asset he thought he might share. I flipped through the document, my pulse quickening with each line. Spousal support waiver, airtight. Debt separation, airtight. Intellectual property inheritance investments, airtight. I laughed aloud, a sound raw and startling in the quiet apartment. 4 days ago, I had felt like the weakest version of myself, betrayed, humiliated, broken. Tonight, reading Patricia's meticulous clauses, I felt the first true spark of power. David and Beatrice thought they had me cornered. They thought my career, my home, my money, all of it would be up for grabs once the divorce began. My sister had probably imagined herself living in my apartment, raising her baby on my dime, cushioned by everything I had built. The irony was almost delicious. She had chosen him as her ticket to an easier life, believing she'd finally escaped my shadow. And David, poor stupid David, had believed he'd stumbled into comfort without earning it. But they were wrong. I sat back in my chair, the prenup spread out in front of me like armor. For the first time in days, my chest felt lighter. They had tried to strip me of everything: my marriage, my family, my dignity. But the one thing they couldn't touch was the foundation I had built for myself. It wasn't just survival anymore. It wasn't about quietly signing papers and disappearing. They had chosen to humiliate me in public, to announce their betrayal in the middle of a celebration that was supposed to be mine. I could have walked away quietly, but the thought of their smug faces, their little victory smiles in the mirror as I left, Terzo, burned in me like fuel. No, they needed to know the truth. Not in whispers, not through lawyers, but face to face. They needed to see me standing unbroken while their fantasies crumbled in their hands. I gathered the papers, slid them back into the envelope, and placed it carefully in the safe. Then I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, breathing deeply. For days I had been suffocating, drowning in betrayal. Tonight I felt oxygen again. When I opened my eyes, the city lights shimmered outside my window. My reflection in the glass looked different, stronger, sharper. The victim in me was gone. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow I begin. And in that quiet moment, I made the decision that would change everything. I wouldn't just survive their betrayal. I would confront them publicly, directly, and I would watch their triumph turn to dust. 3 weeks crawled by, each day thick with silence and pretending. David came by twice more to collect the rest of his things, always with Beatrice in tow, like she was his bodyguard. They moved around my apartment like tourists, whispering to each other while I stood by, arms crossed, watching. Their smugness was almost unbearable, the way they avoided my eyes, the way her hand brushed over her belly, in deliberate little motions as if to remind me of her victory. My mother called nearly every day. "Marina, you can't let bitterness eat you alive. David made a mistake. B is young, and now there's a baby to think about." "Mom," I'd cut her off, my voice like ice. "This isn't a mistake. This is betrayal, and it's not my job to think about their baby." Her sighs filled the line, heavy and disappointed. Family should stay together no matter what. I would hang up before saying something that would scorch the earth between us. My father never called. He stayed silent, as if watching from the edges, unwilling to pick sides, but not naive enough to think there wasn't a side to pick. I could picture him in his recliner in San Antonio, newspaper folded on his lap, eyes darting away when Mom brought up the subject. Meanwhile, I kept my mask firmly in place. At work, I was the newly promoted director, smiling at meetings, closing deals, shaking hands. At night, I rehearsed. Not lines, but composure. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and practiced the calm, measured expression I wanted to wear. The look that said, "You haven't broken me." When the time felt right, I called Beatrice. She answered on the second ring, her tone falsely bright. "Mari, I'm so glad you called. We've all been worried." I kept my voice even. "I've been thinking. About everything." Silence hummed on the other end. Then she rushed in. "Really? That's good. David was so scared you'd drag this out, make it messy." "I don't want messy," I said smoothly. "We're adults. We can settle this like adults. No grudges." Her relief was palpable. "Oh, Mari, that's all we wanted. Maybe we could meet? Just talk it out, decide next steps, civilly." "Of course," I said. "Why don't we meet at Terzo Saturday night? Same place as before. Closure." I could almost hear the smile in her voice. "Perfect. David will be thrilled. Thank you, Mari. Really thank you." When I hung up, the smile I allowed myself was small but sharp. The next few days were a blur of preparation. I didn't want to leave anything to chance. I had the prenup photocopied, scanned, and emailed to Helena, who responded with a curt airtight, "They don't stand a chance." I tucked the original papers back into their envelope and slipped it into my purse, rehearsing in my mind the moment I would place it on the table. On Saturday evening, I dressed slowly, deliberately. I chose a black sheath dress, elegant, understated, commanding. Not the blue dress David had once loved, not the bright colors my sister favored. Black was for control, for finality. I smoothed my hair into a sleek bun, applied lipstick the shade of fresh blood, and studied my reflection. My face was calm, composed, unreadable. Perfect. The drive downtown was quiet, the city buzzing around me, neon signs flashing in the warm spring night. I pulled into Terzo's valet line, handed off my keys, and walked through the restaurant doors with my head high. The hostess recognized me instantly. Her polite smile faltered for a split second. Then she recovered. "Good evening, Ms. Silva. Will it be the same table?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "The same." She led me through the golden glow of the dining room, past clinking glasses and murmured conversations to the secluded corner table. The same leather chairs, the same candlelight flickering against the polished wood. I slid into my seat, smoothing the skirt of my dress, and placed my purse beside me. The envelope inside pressed against the leather like a heartbeat. The restaurant around me pulsed with warmth and chatter, but I felt apart from it a figure waiting in the wings before the curtain rose. My palms rested flat on the table, my breathing measured. Any moment now they would walk in David with that restless, shifting energy, Beatrice glowing with the false confidence of someone who thought she had won. They would see me sitting here calm, beautiful, composed, and they would mistake it for surrender. Let them. Because tonight, they weren't the ones holding the script. The candle flickered, throwing shadows across my face, and I allowed myself one small smile, sharp as glass. In my purse, the envelope waited, and so did I. They arrived 10 minutes late, just as I knew they would, enough time to make an entrance to let me simmer. David's arm was wrapped around Beatrice's shoulders, and she leaned into him like a prize he had just won. Her dress was soft pink, cinched at the waist to show off her small but visible belly. She radiated that smug glow of someone who believed the future was already hers. "Marina," she exclaimed, hugging me as if we were long-lost sisters instead of adversaries. "You look beautiful." "Doesn't she look beautiful, David?" He smiled, a shallow, nervous twitch. "Yeah. You look good." "Thank you," I said evenly, sitting back down. My purse rested against my chair, the envelope inside a silent weapon. We ordered wine, the same Chianti as last time at Beatrice's suggestion, her eyes twinkling as if the irony delighted her. I let them toast. "To new beginnings," she said, clinking her glass against David's, then mine. The first 20 minutes passed in polite small talk, the kind that masked tension. Beatrice chattered about pregnancy cravings and baby names. David nodded along, rubbing her hand like punctuation. They were playing at being a couple in love, trying to sell the story to me, to themselves, to anyone watching. Then David cleared his throat, set his glass down, and leaned forward. "So, about the divorce." I tilted my head, waiting. "We think it would be best," he began carefully, "to handle this amicably. No drawn-out legal battles. Just divide things fairly, keep it simple." "Fairly," I echoed. "Go on." "The apartment," he said, avoiding my eyes. "We could sell it and split the money. Same with your investments. And of course with your new salary. Alimony could help us transition until B and I are settled." B and I. The words hit my ears like broken glass, but I didn't flinch. I simply reached for my purse. Their faces brightened, expectant, greedy. They thought I was about to pull out paperwork that confirmed their fantasy. Instead, I placed a yellowed envelope on the table and slid it toward them. "What's that?" David asked, his voice thinning. "Our prenuptial agreement." The color drained from his face. Beatrice blinked, confused. "Prenup? You made a prenup?" I leaned back calm. "We did. 4 years ago. You signed it, David. Without even reading it, if I recall. That's not—" I opened the papers, spreading them like cards on the table. "Complete separation of assets. Every property, investment, or income remains solely with the individual who acquired it, meaning my apartment is mine. My investments are mine. My salary is mine." David snatched the pages with trembling hands, scanning them desperately. His lips moved silently as though the words might rearrange themselves. "Even with an agreement," Beatrice stammered, "marriage means community property right. Assets during—" "Not when there's complete separation." I cut in, tapping the clause with my manicured nail. Everything acquired during the marriage belongs to whoever earned or bought it. There's no division. None. Her face shifted confusion, curdling into horror. David slammed the papers down. This can't be legal. It's airtight, I said calmly. Witnessed, filed, recorded. You signed every page. Dr. Williams explained it all. You nodded like you understood. He gripped his hair with both hands. I didn't know what I was signing. You tricked me. I smiled, small and sharp. Ignorance isn't fraud, David. Beatrice's voice trembled. But alimony. He has a right to alimony. Page 5, Section 3. I said smoothly. Spousal support waiver. Both parties forfeit any right to alimony or maintenance. You waived it, David. Right here. He read it, his face collapsing. No, that's not. Correct, I said. You leave this marriage with exactly what you brought in your clothes, your credit card debt, and that financed truck. Nothing more. Silence fell heavy. The candle between us flickered, throwing shadows across their stricken faces. I leaned forward. And then there's child support. Beatrice's head snapped up. Child support? Yes, I said, my voice velvet and steel. David's obligation to your baby. In Texas, it's 20% of net income for one child. If he makes about $3,800 after taxes, that's $760 a month. Every month. Until your child turns 18. Plus medical expenses, daycare school costs. Her lips parted, eyes darting to David. He stared at the table, face pale, jaw clenched. Let's do the math. I continued, my tone like a teacher explaining to inattentive students. David's $5,000 gross minus taxes minus child support. That leaves about $3,400 a month. Add your inconsistent $2,000 from freelancing when you even have projects, and the two of you will scrape by on $5,400 for a family of 3. Subtract rent, food, diapers, utilities. I let the silence finish the calculation for them. Beatrice's hands twisted in her lap. We'll manage. You'll survive, I corrected. Barely. But the life you thought you were taking from me. The apartment. The investments. The comfort. That was never yours to steal. David finally looked up. His eyes bloodshot. Mari, please. Don't do this. You can't just leave us with nothing. You did that to yourselves, I said evenly. You planned this betrayal for months. You staged it in public thinking I'd crumble. You thought I'd beg or bribe you to stay. Instead, you'll learn what life looks like without my generosity. Tears welled in Beatrice's eyes. Mari, I'm your sister. We're family. Family doesn't seduce husbands, I said coldly. Family doesn't humiliate each other for sport. I slid the papers back into the envelope and tucked it into my purse. Then I laid 2 crisp 50s on the table, for my share of the wine. I stood smoothing my black dress, every movement deliberate. They sat frozen as if shackled by the truth. At the door I turned back once, catching their hollow faces in the golden glow. Now you'll learn, I said, my voice steady as stone, what it's like to count pennies. And I walked out, the candlelight behind me flickering against the ruins of their illusion. The divorce was over in 60 days, swift, clean, merciless. David didn't contest. Helena told me he met with a lawyer once who likely explained the prenup in blunt terms and charged him for the hour before sending him on his way. When the papers came back signed, my pen barely trembled as I scrawled my name. Just like that, 4 years of marriage dissolved into ink and courthouse stamps. David walked away with nothing but his pickup truck, a pile of credit card debt, and a child support order that hit his paycheck like clockwork. Beatrice's glittering vision of stability, of designer nurseries and nights in my apartment overlooking Austin shattered almost instantly. My sister moved back into our parents' house in San Antonio, dragging David and her growing belly with her. The 1-bedroom rental she'd been proud of before suddenly looked too small, too dingy, too real for the life she thought she deserved. From the sidelines, I watched the cracks widen. David's dealership commissions dipped when the economy slowed. His income fell closer to $3,500 a month. 20% of that went straight to the state for child support. Beatrice's freelance gigs were sporadic, and with a newborn, her excuses multiplied faster than her invoices. They fought loudly often. Mom whispered about it in phone calls, her voice thick with worry. "Marina, you don't understand," she pleaded one evening. "They're barely making it. Diapers formula rent your sister is drowning. Couldn't you help?" "Just a little." I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Mom, I warned you. I will not finance their choices. They thought they were stealing a fortune. Let them live with the reality they created." "But the baby." "The baby is David's responsibility," I snapped. "Not mine." Silence filled the line, heavy and disappointed, before Mom sighed. "I just wish family meant more to you." It did mean more to me. Enough that I refused to let it be a weapon. Meanwhile, my own life bloomed in ways I hadn't dared imagine during those sleepless nights after Terzo. My promotion wasn't just a title, it was freedom. The salary bump pushed me into a world where choices expanded instead of contracted. Bonuses rolled in as my division exceeded targets. I traveled for work, then tacked on weekends in Paris, Rome, Barcelona. I stayed in 5-star hotels, ate meals paired with wines I couldn't pronounce, wandered cobblestone streets with no one's schedule but my own. Loneliness, I had feared it at first. But what I found was peace. The kind that sinks into your bones after years of bending yourself around other people's needs. My apartment was quiet, yes, but it was mine. I came home to a place untouched by betrayal, a sanctuary where every detail was chosen by me, for me. Still, I knew I couldn't carry all of it alone. That's when I started therapy. Dr. Rebecca Chen was small and soft-spoken, her office filled with books and pale sunlight. The first time I sat across from her, my hands clenched in my lap, she asked one question that unspooled me. "Marina, when was the last time someone took care of you?" I wept for 15 minutes straight. Session by session, I learned to peel away the years of guilt and obligation that had chained me to people who only took. I learned that love without respect was exploitation, that family without boundaries was corrosion. Most of all, I learned that putting myself first wasn't selfish, it was survival. By the time my 30th birthday rolled around, I was unrecognizable from the woman who had stumbled out of Terzo Hollow and shaking. I hosted a rooftop party at my new loft downtown overlooking Lady Bird Lake. There was champagne, a string quartet, a guest list of friends and colleagues who genuinely celebrated me. As I raised a glass, laughter rising around me, I realized I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. And then, of course, the messages began. First, one tentative Mari. "It's me. I know you're angry, but I miss you. Sophia should know her aunt. Please call." Then another. "Expenses are so high. Could you at least help with baby things?" Formula clothes. You know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't desperate. Then bolder still, David's hours got cut. "We can't cover rent. Please, Mari. You have so much. Don't let us fall apart." Each ping of my phone was a ghost tugging at old chains. I read every word, my heart tightening, but I never replied. She had stolen without shame, expected without guilt. Now she wanted mercy. The 10th message finally ended it. "If you ignore me, you're not just abandoning me, you're abandoning Sophia. Blood means something, Mari." That was the one I blocked her number on. Because blood might mean something, but betrayal meant more. The night I silenced her for good, I stood on my terrace with a glass of wine staring at the city lights. The air smelled of rain, the streets glistening below. For the first time in years, I felt entirely free, untethered from her envy, from his cowardice, from the endless cycle of taking and excusing. I had chosen myself, and that choice was the only one that had ever truly set me free. Time has a way of softening edges, but it never erased the memory of that night at Terzo. Even now, years later, the sound of clinking wine glasses in a restaurant sometimes sent me back to that moment. My sister's smug smile. David's restless hands, their cruel announcement timed to my triumph. But instead of pain, it triggered a quiet, private satisfaction. Because I had not only survived their betrayal, I had built something far greater from its ashes. David and Beatrice, on the other hand, had settled into a different kind of life. A small, cramped trailer park on the outskirts of San Antonio became their reality. Mom described it once in hushed tones, peeling siding a patch of dirt instead of a yard, the sound of arguments carrying too easily through thin walls. David's dealership career had withered. Luxury cars were a hard sell in a shaky economy. He took odd jobs at smaller lots, never earning more than enough to scrape by once child support was deducted. Beatrice's freelancing sputtered. Between caring for Sophia and juggling overdue bills, she never regained the spark of entitlement that had once burned so brightly. They fought often, my father admitted reluctantly. About money, about responsibility, about how it had all gone so wrong. Sometimes in his softer moments, Dad confessed he felt sorry for them. Mom never stopped pleading with me, Marina, you have so much. They have so little. Surely you could spare something for Sophia. But I never did. Not because I hated the child Sophia was innocent, but because enabling their choices would have meant betraying myself all over again. I paid for groceries occasionally when Dad sent me bills directly, and I covered a pediatrician visit once when Sophia was ill. But I made it clear I would not funnel money through Beatrice and David. Their hardship was theirs to bear. Meanwhile, my own life flourished in ways I could never have imagined during those sleepless nights after the betrayal. Within 3 years, I had climbed from commercial director to executive director at my firm. My salary tripled. My name became known in the industry, and my opinion was sought in boardrooms I once only dreamed of entering. I bought a modern glass-walled home overlooking Lady Bird Lake, paying cash after selling my first apartment for a profit. My net worth crossed 7 figures before my 32nd birthday. But wealth was only part of it. More valuable was the peace I carved out for myself. Therapy with Dr. Chen helped me rebuild from the inside out. I no longer mistook obligation for love or generosity for weakness. I learned to set boundaries sharp as steel to guard my energy to invest only in people who gave as much as they received. And slowly the loneliness I once feared dissolved. I built a circle of friends who celebrated my wins without jealousy, who checked in when I traveled too much or worked too late. I dated carefully at first, then with more openness. One man in particular, Daniel, a thoughtful architect with his own thriving practice, reminded me that partnership didn't have to mean sacrifice. With him, there was no resentment of my success, no quiet tally of who paid what. We met as equals, and we grew as equals. Sometimes I caught myself wondering if David and Beatrice ever thought of me when they lay awake at night counting bills instead of blessings. I imagined them watching the numbers dwindle in their bank account, realizing the life they'd tried to steal had slipped through their fingers like water. I imagined Beatrice holding Sophia and feeling the weight of responsibility she once thought she could pass to me. Did they regret it? Did they ever look at each other and see not love, but the wreckage of choices built on greed? If they did, they never admitted it. The only messages I received were the same tired pleas. Please, Mari. Help with rent. Help with groceries. Help for Sophia. I ignored them all, because my victory wasn't in their suffering. It was in my freedom. That was the lesson betrayal had gifted me. That resilience is a choice, justice is a process, and freedom is the prize for those willing to fight for it. I didn't rejoice in their misery, but I refused to drown myself to keep them afloat. On my 35th birthday, I stood on the terrace of my home, a glass of champagne in my hand, looking out at the Austin skyline. The city glowed beneath me, alive and relentless, just like I had become. Friends filled the house behind me, laughter spilling through open doors, music pulsing softly. Daniel's arm wrapped around my waist as he kissed my temple and whispered, "You've built something extraordinary." And I had. Not just the house, not just the career or the money, but the life. A life untouched by betrayal, unbent by envy, unbound from people who saw me as a ladder instead of a sister, a wife, a person. I thought of Beatrice then, of David, of Sophia. Somewhere in San Antonio, they were probably arguing about overdue bills, about diapers, about gas money. And for a flicker of a moment, I wondered if they still believed their gamble had been worth it. Then I lifted my glass higher, the bubbles rising like a toast to myself. They thought betrayal would break me. Instead, it freed me. And sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. And with that final reflection, Marina's chapter closes not in bitterness, but in strength and freedom. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe for more stories of betrayal, justice, and resilience. Share your thoughts. Below, we read every comment, and your perspective matters. Was Marina right to cut ties, or should family bonds outweigh betrayal? Thank you for listening. This has been a story from Revenge Served Cold. We'll see you next time.